Hello, I'm Michelle Kang at NAEYC. I'm here today with Faith Rogow. Faith is a media literacy expert and the author of the NAEYC book, Media Literacy for Young Children, Teaching Beyond Screen Time Debates. Thank you, Faith, for joining me for this conversation.
Oh, I'm so excited.
Yes, it's really exciting. And your book is just such a compelling book for our times. And I'd love to hear if you could share some of your inspiration for the book.
Sure. It seems so obvious these days that so much of our lives are kind of infused with the digital commons and the digital world. And and yet a lot of folks are still kind of stuck in language around teaching 21st century skills as if we're not already 2 decades and more into the 21st century. So part of it is just to address, well, how are we preparing young children for the real lives they actually are living now and will live as they grow into adulthood? Um, so I started looking. Now I've been doing media literacy education for a long time, about 3 decades. And like most media literacy educators, my early focus was on how we do this with older students. And and that's where the field has been. And so, but my love is early childhood. And so I started looking at, well, what's there in early childhood? And what I found was that we were kind of mired in these discussions still about screen time debates and how many minutes was okay. And I think that comes out of a lot of really important concerns about media, but it's not an education strategy. Counting minutes isn't an education strategy. So I wanted to write something that acknowledged our concerns and gave a roadmap for how we address those concerns. And instead of coming at these issues as educators out of our anxieties about media, how could we begin to envision education, media literacy education for young children that is filled with what's so great about working with young kids, which is that sense of wonder and discovery and joy. So that's what this book is for me. It is this model for how we do this, how we can introduce and integrate media literacy education into our work, building on that sense of that great joy that comes from being an early childhood educator.
That's great. And I think that when you said counting minutes, probably something resonated for so many folks who are watching this because we didn't know what to do. And so it seemed like the way to place boundaries about it was to say, we're going to count minutes. So it's terrific that you can give us a different frame through some of the things that you share in the content. Do you have a particular audience that you think will find your book helpful?
Well, so kind of went round and round about this and thinking about this book. And as I looked out at the world out there, there are a lot of great parent books out there right now. So I thought, this isn't going to be a parenting book. And I didn't want it to be about the technology. I wanted it to be about children and what we're doing with children. So the target is really people who are working with children. So it's very explicitly, I think, for early childhood professionals, for early childhood educators, with educators in its broadest sense. So anyone from a home care provider, a center administrator, center staff, aides, policymakers, even who are directly involved with children, people who are learning how to be early childhood educators and the people who teach them. It's for all of those folks.
That's great. Speaking about educators, and it's terrific that you were thinking about them as the people who would find this useful. Sometimes I hear from educators that they are struggling with how to answer parents who ask for advice about screen time. And you mentioned earlier, coming away from this idea about the minutes. What would you share with educators on this question of how to support parents in their questions?
So there's a whole section in the book on how early childhood educators can reach out to families around the media related topics. But the whole easy answer to screen time is that it's really about what you're doing with screens, not about how long or how much or how little you're using screens. There are so many different things we do with screens nowadays. The framing of screen time debates came out of a world of television, early television at that. That's not the world we live in anymore. And so we really want to pay much more attention to what kids are doing with screens, what families are doing with screens. And there are families doing lots of great stuff with screens. So my direct advice to parents, other than thinking more about what kids are doing instead of how long they're doing it, is if it's not a problem, if your kid seems relatively well adjusted and healthy and they're kind of going through their days, then don't worry about it, because chances are whatever it is that you're doing is just fine. If it does seem to be a problem, then the book provides a whole set of recommendations for ways that we can begin to assess the content of what kids are looking at or playing, and the strategies of how they're using screens and integrating them into family life. And so those can be jumping off points for examining and helping families gain more skills around looking at the role that screen media play in their lives.
That's great. Thank you, Faith. I would love, if thinking about the educator, if there is one piece of advice you would give to them about media literacy and screen time, what would you share?
So, given the way it's been framed in the field, I think my first piece of advice would be that our job can't be to convince kids not to like what they love, right? If that's the way we frame how we approach screens, then we're fighting a losing battle. So I guess my primary piece of advice is, look at this as education. Look at it the same way, we talk about one of the ahas for some people reading the book is, what, books are media. And a lot of early childhood educators already have a whole lot of skills around how we introduce books and how we use books. Well, a lot of that could apply to a lot of media. And so we might start looking there for strategies, for the ways that we can begin to help children build skills. And that it is about building skills. I mean, I guess that would be my other thing, that this isn't about monitoring media. We don't want to make ourselves into compliance officers. We are educators. We want to have fun with the kids. And they know it if we approach them with our anxieties instead of our sense of wonder and our sense of fun. And this should be fun.
Well, I think that is a great note to end on, that it should be fun, that we want children to continue to experience wonder, and that that is what developmentally appropriate practice is about. It is about play and wonder and the joy of early childhood. And it sounds like this book is a terrific resource for educators. And I know that that many are going to look forward to being able to read it and be able to have it as a support. So I want to thank our audience for joining us for this conversation. I hope you'll visit the NAEYC store at naec.org/shop to purchase your copy of Media Literacy for Young Children. And thank you so much, Faith, for this timely book. We are so grateful. And I know that the field is extremely grateful for this resource too.
Thank you. I'm so honored to be a NAEYC author and to have this book out there in the world.
Thank you.